Charles Vogl is an acclaimed author. He is a keynote speaker. He's an advisor to global leaders. His work draws from more than 3,000 years of spiritual traditions and applies that wisdom to today's most pressing leadership challenges. And we have some challenges, don't we?
My work is based on very long-standing, time-tested ideas and principles. And so I think of my work as simply distilling them and sharing wisdom that we've all known for untold generations.
In a world where so many of us feel like we're disconnected, despite being constantly connected on our phones and every other way that you can imagine possible, what really creates the glue that brings us all together?
So based on the research, which is really clear, electronic devices erode the experience of our time together. Simply having a device in view meaningfully erodes our experience together. And all of us who study spiritual spaces, religious tradition, and liturgy see exactly what's going on. It's one hair away from worshiping the phone. Silence isn't a problem. Silence is how we demonstrate to one another that we're available to listen and that we're patient.
To get started and to give people a little bit of context about you, I thought that we might go into talking a little bit about your own personal story, because I know that it's not necessarily a traditional path to begin looking at spiritual traditions and then working on community and teaching community to others. And so let's get into that. How did you get here?
Well, the quick version for the purpose of this conversation is let's go back when I finished undergraduate school and I had a degree and I wanted to make a difference in the world, but I didn't know how to do that. And of course, the world says, go get a job. And that didn't sound really exciting. One of the adventures I had is I volunteered full time in a radical homeless shelter in Southern California. It's called the Catholic Worker. And one of the things that made the Catholic Worker radical is that we who were volunteering would actually invite in people who were homeless into the house because that was a safe place to stay, consistent with Christian teaching. And in that place, the reality of dealing with homelessness in America is there's addiction, mental health issues, and then, of course, medical challenges that can be really disturbing. And none of us could do that except we work together. But no person could minister to all these sometimes dangerous challenges if you do it by yourself. And that really sat with me, that the only reason any of us can do this is we're doing it together. Subsequent to that, I served in the U.S. Peace Corps in northern Zambia, and I was there during the famous AIDS epidemic. And there, I was really struck when living in a village of 150 families where 1/3 of the year was called the hunger season. But if you lived in the village, you would always be taken care of. And that's because nobody would let somebody go hungry if they had food. And so I was introduced to a world so different than where I was living in California, where everybody knew my name and everybody was looking out for me. And there are dark sides and bright sides to that, but nonetheless, it was a startling, change for me to go to the culture. Came back to the United States, started making a film that would go on to become a PBS film about genocide survivors. And when I started, I literally didn't know how to turn on a camera. Certainly didn't have a rich uncle to pay for the film. So I just had to start fundraising. And I had mentors teach me how I had to bring people together who shared values and purpose to create a project much bigger than me. And it was in that process that someone explained to me that I had been using a Superman strategy of trying to do everything well. And that had what caused the burnout and the cynicism that had been developed. And they taught me that if I wanted to be good at what I was doing and have international impact, what I needed to be good at was inviting people together around shared values and purpose to work together. Well, subsequent to that, I went to graduate school to study religion, philosophy, and ethics. And while I was there, I remember being stunned sitting in class, learning about spiritual traditions that have been so successful bringing people together around shared values and purpose for 1,000 years that I was aware that I could stand up in that classroom, literally go outside and go find people in the world continuing to gather around those traditions. And I thought that was deeply inspiring. So here I was, I finished that degree, and I didn't want to be a PBS genocide filmmaker anymore. Wasn't going to go back to Sub-Saharan Africa and work on human rights issues. And I certainly didn't want to get ordained. So I followed my wife to California and started just talking to people to find out who's doing what and how I could contribute to the economy, right? One of those lunches I had was a guy named Kevin Lynn. Kevin had recently started a company that's now called Twitch. And back then he shared that they only had 50 million members at the time. And Kevin explained how what he really wanted to do better was knit together the people who were showing up on the Twitch platform.
Wow.
He didn't say this because he thought I would solve it. He didn't say this because he knew that I had better wisdom. He was just talking about challenges he was facing. Well, in that moment at that lunch, my head almost exploded with all the ideas I wanted to share with Kevin. And so I went home to write what I thought was going to be a 10-page paper, put it on the internet, offered to Kevin to build his global tech company. And it turned out I had so much more to say, because that's when I discovered that I had spent 15 to 20 years before that lunch practicing, learning, being coached by mentors, and of course, looking at traditions that were successful in knitting together relationships over shared values and purpose, even through sometimes existentially threatening times. So I kept writing. I was surprised when it was book length. I was surprised when the first publisher wanted to publish it. I was surprised when it was published, it won an award. And quite frankly, I'm surprised now that it's gone around the world and we're talking about the second edition coming out.
I find it fascinating to be at this point where you have so much insight into how to bring people together and what really seems to work. And the fact that we still are so divided, it must be incredibly frustrating for you on an ongoing basis, because you're like, I have some answers, guys. I have some things that could help. Do you ever get frustrated with this?
The frustration is not the word that I use. There's definitely a longing. My work is based on very long-standing, time-tested ideas and principles. And so I think of my work as simply distilling them and sharing wisdom that we've all known for untold generations. And I think that's one of the reasons why KiKi the book landed for you, is when you read what I wrote, presumably everything you came across, you thought, of course that's true.
Yeah.
Of course, my grandparents and their grandparents and their grandparents have been using all these ideas in that book, and we've just forgotten them. We're just not using them. And so there's a longing for me to go out and shout, could we please put down the distractions, these new, obviously failing notions of what people need to do or want to do when they come together, and just go back to what we were doing in the 1500s and the 1300s and the 1200s. Not everything, obviously, but these principles, and knit together those relationships that have been serving our families for millennia.
Yeah, it's wild, because I think that when we're thinking about something like this book, I would have said that this book's pretty comprehensive. And for those who are listening later, I'm holding up The Art of Community: 7 Principles for Belonging that Charles wrote. Listen, the second edition came out, it has 25% new content. What was there to add? Why did it need more content? Why did it need this second edition to be released?
Well, so the first book came out in 2016, and it's hard to remember then, but back when I released that book, and my publisher took a wild risk releasing a book on community by a guy with a degree in religion. When I said that I was writing a book on community, because it was not in the zeitgeist as it is now, there was assumption that I must be writing about people on a beach singing Kumbaya. And little did we know that in a few years, the Surgeon General would look at the data on our separation, isolation in America alone and declare a loneliness epidemic. And of course, we certainly didn't know that the pandemic would come and separate us and isolate us in ways that were unprecedented in a generation. So a lot has changed since the book came out in 2016. And it was important that for new readers who found it after you, KiKi, that the book acknowledge the world has changed and speak to that. So that's partly what happened. And then I've now traveled around the world talking about this. And I think, the book is used by many of the most admired organizations in the world, including Google and LinkedIn and the US Army. And so in the course of all those conversations, I learned some ideas that were going to be helpful to add to the body of work I shared, to help transition learning ideas that are very, very old and making them immediately applicable. I'll give you one idea, KiKi. In the new edition, I talk explicitly about what I coined the campfire experience. And this is the idea that the relationships that we form that support us and make us resilient in the most challenging times are formed in small, intimate experiences. And KiKi, if you think of the top 5 people you would call tonight, if someone in your family got a bad diagnosis or there's an emergency in your household, my guess is of those 5 relationships, all of them were formed in a series of small, intimate experiences. All of them.
Yeah.
And yet we live in a culture where when I go to events and organizations invite me to participate, where their idea of connecting people are big events in big rooms full of people, often with loud music. And because somebody who's producing it is scared to death that we're going to become bored, they put entertainment everywhere, which often includes screens or performance.
Loud music. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we start distinguishing what we call campfire experiences, and I just simply call that because people have been sitting around campfires and intimate experiences for generations. Now we give producers permission to create the small, intimate experiences. Or if we have a big event, notice where in that experience are we making it possible through furniture, through sound, by invitation, through programming to encourage these small experiences. When I say small, KiKi, I mean small. In the book, I have a diagram called the Brooks Lines of Communication, and anybody listening can look that up on the internet. That shows as soon as we add a 6th person to a group of people talking, we increase the number of communication lines by fully 50%.
Wow.
And as someone who's not trained and hasn't looked at those graphs, they're like, well, it's 4 people, 5 people, 6 people, 7 people. That's a small group. No. That 6th person increases the number of lines by 50%. We're burdening our participants with that. Well, I talked to organizations with 6 digits of employees, and their idea of a small group is 15. KiKi, you've never sat at a table of 10 at a conference, at a fundraiser, or a wedding for hours, 2-3 hours. You've never stood up at the end of that meal and thought, wow, what deep and interesting and vulnerable conversations we had. I can't wait to talk to them again. Am I right?
Right.
It's too
That's
big.
true.
You
That's
can't handle
true.
it.
I mean, I've had it where 2 of us had sort of sectioned off, but it was like, it never happens at the whole
That's right.
table. It's like
And when
that.
you're
Yeah.
sectioning yourself off, you're like defending yourself from all the distractions. So
Yes.
what if everybody listening here who brings people together in associations recognizes, oh, my participants are hungry for these intimate, quiet experiences, and I can invest in that and offer to them, and they're actually going to find what they're seeking, those extemporaneous conversations that lead to something rich and powerful.
But you so get it. It's clear because I'm telling you, if you work in associations, you attend endless amounts of these meetings where you end up at those tables. And you're absolutely right. Someone thinks that you're at a round and it's a round of 8. And hey, you've got room. You've got this is great. It's the perfect opportunity to build those connections. And you're saying not necessarily, let's look at how this really works and be mindful of that. Valerie, hi, Valerie. She's out here on LinkedIn and she says, if you have inner and outer rings, is it important to have paths into the inner rings? Are the rings a hierarchy or just a way to organize around different needs and interests? How much of the purpose is about progressing, we can say progressing through the rings versus meeting everyone where they are? So yeah, that's a really great question. Valerie's wanting to get into the details. She wants
right. Well, Valerie, you were asking all the right questions, and just to give you confidence, that's actually a whole chapter in the book, and so I have taken time to address that. Not only is it important that there's a path to get into the rings, it's important that we have people called elders that help people cross through those ring boundaries, and we call them gatekeepers. Everyone listening, I'm guessing, has been to a spiritual organization or a professional organization or a sport organization. You showed up to find out, do I like it? Do I fit here? Look, I'm into biking, but I'm not into hardcore biking, or I'm only into hardcore biking, or can you learn to bike in this? Whatever it is.
Yeah.
And we just don't know how you get in, and we don't know who's doing what and if I fit, right? I've talked to so many religious organizations, churches that wring their hands because young families aren't joining. And the first questions I ask, well, if your young family you show up, who's the person who knows they're going to help them get connected? They're going to cross the boundary from visitor to, we would say, novice, right?
Mhm.
And if your organization doesn't know who those people are, we don't know who visitors need to meet to find out this is what the schedule looks like, and this is, how you should be prepared if you're going to bike with us or put your kids in Sunday school. Then how do you think the visitors know?
Right.
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 And the rings are not there to just keep people out because you're a snob. The rings are kept as a boundary on shared value and purpose. If Charles isn't interested in creating conferences of over 500 people internationally and building 20 years of experience, then you shouldn't be at this event, Charles. It's not because you're a bad person, but you're not committing decades of your life and you're not planning to create events of over 500 people.
Right.
And if you are, then we can talk about if there's a ring for you. So there are both segments and then there are inner rings. So we'll just pick a biking group because it's easy. Most people have seen a bike.
Mhm.
There may be a mountain bike group. There may be a road racing group. There may be a beach cruising bike group
I
for
was going to
families.
say beach cruiser.
That's right.
I'm dealing with the shore over here in New Jersey. So
Yeah, and if what I need to worry about is having enough wet wipes for my kids when our family goes on a beach cruise, maybe I shouldn't be in the mountain biking group that's talking
Right.
about a multi-day trek across the Rocky Mountains.
Yes.
Doesn't mean I'm bad. Doesn't mean they're better than me. It's like you're worried about wet wipes and bathroom stops, and we're talking about how do we get gear that's going to keep us alive in an accident, right?
Mhm.
So that would be a segmenting. And then inner rings are not there to just let people lord over how they like each other. Inner rings are a representation of maturation. So let's say I want to do mountain biking in the Rockies. Well, maybe I should learn just the basic safety navigation. And then once I'm up for that, then maybe I'm okay for a full day ride with groups of more experience. And then after that, maybe we can talk about multi-day. And then after that, maybe we can talk about winter, right? But Charles, if you don't know how to keep yourself safe and what safety equipment you need, then we're not going to take you on a winter multi-day biking trip. Now, the people who run these inner rings, we call them elders, right? They have more wisdom and knowledge, and they share the values of, in this case, outdoor adventure. They're not there to congratulate themselves with their inner rings. As we mature in inner ring progression, our expansion, we expand our concern for others. So when I show up to learn mountain biking, I want to learn to mountain bike. I want to have a good time. I want to stay safe. If I'm running the Berkeley Mountain Group Club, I better be concerned, is everybody joining me safe? Are they not getting lost? Do they have the right equipment? Do they know where we're going to meet? And then if I'm going to be teaching multi-day mountain biking adventures, I better be concerned about everybody in the trail, everybody who's on the mountain and may need safety equipment. So as I mature in the inner rings, my concern for people expands, and now I'm contributing. I'm teaching people, how do you bandage wounds in the mountains? I teach them, how do you make sure that you get to safety if you get lost? So yes, segments and inner rings, and they reflect a pattern of maturation. And if we want people to join inner rings and make them more fun, then we need to make sure that some of our elders understand their gatekeepers to invite people on the inside.
Lauren asks a really great question. She's curious about what you think, Charles, about Mark Zuckerberg's assertion that we'll have more AI friends than human ones. That's a really good question.
I don't see anything good coming out of that.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be great. Maybe I will sound like a Luddite in the next generation. I don't really care how many people are connected to me online that have a moniker that says like or a thumbs up. Here's what I care about, Lauren. When my wife gets sick and I'm going to struggle taking care of my son, maybe even keeping the house, maybe getting out of bed, I'm going to care about who's going to show up. And maybe just as importantly, I care that there are people that when that time comes for them, they can call me and I get to show up.
Right.
And I don't think any of us in those moments are going to care what our social media numbers say. And I think we're really not going to care how many of those social media numbers are not real people.
Yeah. You brought up earlier, you said when something like a traumatic thing happens, who you're going to call is probably a handful of people, and those people you've probably had those campfire experiences with before. And this past year, I really went through that. I lost my mom,
Mm.
and when I ended up going back, I'm originally from Missouri. When my sister and I went back, I had posted that we were going to have this memorial service for our mother. And the people who showed up, Charles, the people who showed up, campfire experiences, absolutely. My very first best friend in the entire world came walking down. I didn't know she would be there. Came walking down. I'm gonna cry. This little dusty and this old cemetery. I see my friend Lisa walking down. I saw my friend from junior high that I was in a singing choir with, and we did all of these performances and competitive stuff together. And it was actually, I saw that in motion, and that's who shows up. It's those people that you create those experiences with. So it's very powerful. And I promise you that no matter how well my instance of Chat GPT knows me, my natal chart, and my all of the other stuff that goes along with that, it would not be walking down the road towards me when I needed someone to give me a hug at a graveside. So really, really powerful stuff. Woo, I took us down a deep path. Let's talk about.
Well, you're doing that because this is how important this subject is.
Yeah, it
And
is.
you're helping everybody listening be reminded of how these ideas literally change lives. And some might even say make life worth living.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to talk about rituals, because I think an interesting thing about your work, and you go into this, and the role that it plays, particularly in community building. But I think that that's something that we don't see as much of when you're thinking about um, professional settings, and when you're talking about building community, is that all associations want to do. They want people to feel like they're connected. They're getting value out of these important connections they have with other people. And yet, when you bring up the word ritual, I think there's a disconnect between what they think of as ritual and how it can be incorporated in an important way into community building. So can you speak to that point?
Yeah, well, in the book, I believe I define a ritual as the things that we do that have meaning.
Mm-hmm.
That can be a very, very brief action, putting
Mm-hmm.
a name on a wall, or it can involve activities for days.
Mm-hmm.
And because they have meaning and we don't do them for practical reasons, usually rituals are both impractical and inefficient.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about all the people, KiKi, you've seen walking down an aisle to get married, my hope is they walked really slowly. And the reason they walked really slowly is because it was impractical and inefficient. And it might have been one of the most powerful moments in some of those family members' lives. So when we talk about ritual, we're talking about doing things that may be impractical and inefficient, but they have a lot of meaning for the people who are doing them. And we're living in a culture where many Americans are largely leaving their home faith traditions. And so one of the things that comes out of that is we're leaving the traditions that give us the rituals that acknowledge and honor how we are changing, or a different way of saying the same thing, that acknowledge and honor our maturation. And so we have 2 generations now of people who have lost rituals that were taken for granted, where people in our lives, people who know us, say in action, we see that you're different now. We see you're a more mature person. And there's a longing for that. And associations have a fantastic opportunity to acknowledge how people are progressing in their field, or adapting into a world full of uncertainty and enduring it. I mean, everybody who had a business where they had to bring people together and live through the pandemic may have demonstrated more resilient than anybody in the field in a generation, if you're still standing. Wow. Is that worth honoring? Is that worth taking 10 to 30 minutes to honor?
This situation of looking at the way that we interact with technology is such an ongoing challenge. What do you suggest to people who, when they're coming into meetings or there's this whole purpose of trying to bring people together, but we all know that these devices and our technology is getting in the way? Do you have some suggestions for people on ways that they can sort of counteract that or put things more into balance?
Absolutely. So based on the research, which is really clear, electronic devices erode the experience of our time together. It turns out simply having a device in view meaningfully erodes our experience together.
Wow.
And I'd like to tell this anecdote when I'm training people. Whenever I speak, there's a point early on where I invite everybody in the room, no matter how big the room, to turn off their phones and put them away where nobody can see them. And it's based because of the research. And at some point when someone's scheduling me to come in, someone on my team is going to tell them Charles is going to do this. And the response is so predictable, we have a name for it. We call it the freak out. Or they're going to freak out because they don't want Charles to tell thousands of people to put away their phone. Right.
Right.
And very often they come back with even better idea. And their better idea is to have everybody in this conference hall put their phones in the center of the table that they're sitting at. That's their better idea. So, KiKi, you know that I have a degree in religion. What I'm going to tell you, you probably don't need a degree in religion to understand. If you go into a space, KiKi, that you've never been in before, do you know the relative importance of the things that are put in the center, lifted up, and lit?
No. How
important are things in our lives that we put in the center, lift up, and lit in the spaces we're in?
Wow. Pretty important.
Pretty important. If I go to your house, things that are in the center, lifted up and lit. So I want you to note that when I go to create a time and a space and experience of connection, the people who are inviting me in want me to invite everyone to put their cell phones in the middle of the table, above the floor.
Like that's the most important, right? No.
And they don't even recognize that they're falling in a pattern of thousands of years. Where we put honorific things.
Wow.
And all of us who study spiritual spaces, religious tradition, and liturgy see exactly what's going on. It's one hair away from worshiping the phone.
That is so wild.
Right, exactly right.
So wild.
And they offer this as a better idea to my idea when they want me to come in the room and create an experience of deep connection for their members. So the reason I mention this is to show you how bad the infection, if you will, of this distraction and erosion and it happened to you and you weren't even in the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my answer is create an option where we invite everybody to put their phone in a device. My device is called a phone basket. And don't say, hey, put in your phone basket because you're a jerk if you're not. Excuse me. Or this is what we do. And if you don't do it, you're a terrible person.
Yeah.
What I say is I'm inviting you to join me and putting your phone here because we're together going to vote with our hands to be with the people in the room instead of the people outside the room.
Making a commitment to the moment.
Then
I love it.
We ritually walk the phones out of the room.
Wow.
Now, we don't walk it far away.
Yeah.
And inevitably, if it's a big enough room and people don't know this is coming, somebody's like, oh, but I have to be in contact. I have to be in contact. I totally have to be in contact. Now, in the 10 years or so we've been doing this, the number of times an emergency came up and somebody had to be in contact is, I think, exactly 0. But nonetheless, in their head, it's real. So we have a way of handling that. And we say, I tell you what, if you want to participate and everybody's doing it, we're walking the phone to the room, you can give your phone to the host and you can give whatever instructions you need to give. If it rings, you got to hand it to me, or I got to check it at 6 p.m. or every 15 minutes, I need to come over and see if there's whatever it is. And you know what happens is it turns out, just like it was in 1990, people can actually have a shared time together without getting called out of the room.
Right.
When we do this, I've noticed there's often a huge sigh of relief that we are collectively desperate for a time to come together where there aren't 30 devices in the room with dozens of programs designed to get our attention when we say what we want to do is spend this time together. But the host needs to create the rules and do it with meaning, right? Not arbitrary. We invite everyone to vote with your hands, to be with those of us who are in the room instead of out the room.
Yeah. I did want to ask you, because I know that you do a ton of these. You do so many interviews. You have been speaking about not just this book, but all of your books for a while now. And so you get asked the same questions all of the time. What's a question that you either never get asked, or you're so rarely at that you're like, why don't people ask me this?
Well, I know why they don't ask me this. And it's terribly, terribly important in our time. And that is, Charles, what's the importance of silence?
Ooh.
And KiKi, you were just sharing that you lost a family member, and it was really moving. And you already shared that the friends that you had, that you formed from a series of experiences in an intimate and quiet place, built relationships that were there for you when you needed and wanted them. And my guess is you're also that person for somebody else. I think I already know, when you had those friends show up at a time where you needed them, you know exactly how much witty repartee you were looking for.
Yeah.
And my guess is what you really wanted were the people that you knew could handle and could be with long moments of silence. And we live in a culture, I'm contacted by hundreds of people who want to create better events, and they want to fill every moment with something entertaining. And I was just at a conference actually last week, and there was a invitation to this group of 30 to do a share activity. And there was a pause, and the pause didn't even make it 30 seconds. And one of this 30 said, "Hey, what's going on here? Why all the silence?" And I got to interrupt and say, silence isn't a problem. Silence is how we demonstrate to one another that we're available to listen and that we're patient. And I promise you, KiKi, if I'm invited to an association event by anybody listening, and I go there and I notice they understand that silence is listening, silence is patience, then I understand there's a sophistication level of bringing people together in powerful experiences they long for that are by far the 99th percentile.
Wow. That is good stuff, Charles. That's really good. Your work is really, really needed in this world, and I'm really thankful that you exist. And so thank you for taking the time to speak with me, to speak with the audience of Association Chat, and for the good work that you do. Thank you.